Hello friends and colleagues, I'm Stanislav Chernog, the author and creator of the Vector Massage and Somatics School. And today we're not talking about the school, we're not talking about massage. We're going to talk about my experience of how I was sick with coronavirus, how I got pneumonia, and how I recovered after this disease, and what main accents I would like to convey to you in terms of your safety, in terms of your anxiety, in terms of rehabilitation after the illness. I do not pretend to be the ultimate truth. I'm not an expert on COVID. I talk exclusively about my experience and about those recipes that helped me. I had a contact with a person on Wednesday. She called me on Thursday and said that she and her husband were ill and accordingly they had a positive test for COVID, and so I have to be careful. I felt the first change on the second day. That is, in my case, the disease was developing quite rapidly. How I felt it? I felt a loss of strength. I felt a chill. Due to the fact that everything is fine with my imagination, I immediately suspected myself of the fact that I was inventing a disease for myself, that I was paranoid, and that nothing like this was happening to me. On Friday, I felt the first symptoms in the form of weakness, in the form of sweating, and a change in consciousness. It was very interesting how much the perception of the surrounding reality had changed almost immediately. Apathy, unwillingness to do anything, self-doubt, anxiety, all this immediately manifested itself rather quickly. I lived through Saturday, Sunday, reflecting on whether it was my rich fantasy that led me to a depressed state, or something had changed in my physiology and in my well-being, literally and physically. And on Monday, I decided that I was giving up working with clients until I felt good or tested negative for COVID. During the first week, I had a subfebrile temperature of about 37.2, and I felt great as long as I was laying in my bed, consuming a lot of liquids, and did not eat anything. The first test I did on Friday, and on the second day it was negative. I did the second test on Monday, and again it was negative. I got the positive test 10 days after I had contact with the person. Accordingly, all these 10 days I felt unhealthy, I felt sick. At the same time, there were no bright, distinct symptoms, and all these 10 days I was worried about if it was COVID or if it could be some other viral disease. During these 10 days, until I received confirmation of my diagnosis, the most disgusting was the feeling of general pressure on me. My wife, after she found out that I was in quarantine, that I did not feel very well, began to pump me up on the subject that I must be treated. This is very serious. Be sure to go to a doctor, get tested and so on. Get medical treatment because you will die. And every time after we talked, I felt the intensification of symptoms. My temperature literally rose physically, panic state began, and I felt that I was about to die. Moreover, many of my friends and acquaintances, being told that I was quarantined, were wishing me to survive, and just in case saying goodbye to me because I was about to die in terrible agony. What helped me in this situation? I bought a pulse oximeter, a thing that measures the amount of oxygen in blood, and every time when another panic attack was rolling over me, there was a feeling that I was about to suffocate. I was putting the device on my finger, finding that everything was not bad at all with the oxygen in my blood, and I was immediately calming down, and after that immediately beginning to feel good. It is important for me to convey to you one thing. My understanding of COVID tells me that one of the main lung problems is the fact that blood clotting is impaired during the COVID period. Blood clotting increases, and as a result, the likelihood of blood clots increases. Micro blood clots circulating through the human blood get stuck in the small capillaries of lungs and thus clog them. In turn, after the capillaries become clogged, this leads to the fact that the walls of the lungs begin to become inflamed, and then pneumonia occurs. Thus, every time I started to get nervous and worried, I began to breathe more intensively, and as a result, the alveoli in my lungs began to clog more intensively. Every time I calmed down, every time I started to breathe very slowly, very deeply, according to Buteyko, if anyone knows what it is, I immediately felt instant relief within half an hour. I began to feel that it became easier for me to breathe, that I feel better, that the unpleasant effects associated with the fever, sweating and weakness had diminished. A little exercise in the form of a walk was very helpful. I was packing myself in all kinds of masks, putting on gloves so as not to infect other people in any way, going out late at night or early in the morning, walking a circle around my house, and was feeling a noticeable relief after that, because immobility and limited movement badly affects metabolism, blood stagnates, respectively it weakens the body's defenses. On the one hand, heavy physical exertion was worsening my condition, emotional outbursts were worsening my condition, light systematic translational exercises were improving my condition. The only kind of pills I was taking was vitamin D. Vitamin D is highly recommended for COVID. There are clinical trials that prove vitamin D is extremely beneficial. Moreover, I clearly felt that after I started taking vitamin D, my condition improved. Some experts recommend taking blood thinners to help prevent blood clots, and here you need to be extremely careful, because some people have problems with clotting factors, and accordingly the drugs for reducing blood clotting should be prescribed by a doctor. Regarding drugs, I strongly recommend that you contact the professionals. When it comes to my experience, this is a single experience, and professionals see hundreds and thousands of people. Respectively, they can rely on the experience of the population. I have a very high level of self-awareness, a high level of sensitivity, so I confidently allowed myself to refuse medications, because I knew at what moments my condition deserved attention and at what moments I could rely on my feelings. In addition, a very important point of COVID is viscosity of blood. If the blood is viscous, it clogs the capillaries in the lungs more effectively, and this leads to an increased likelihood of pneumonia. At some point, I had a spontaneous desire to eat sweets, and after I ate cinnamon rolls, I felt a distinct deterioration in my condition. At that moment, when after that I went on a low-carb diet, I actually gave up sugar, jam of any kind, potatoes, pasta, bread, everything that contains carbohydrates. I felt that in a day as I sat on a low-carb diet, my condition had improved markedly. The amount of sugar in your blood changes the viscosity of your blood. The thinner and more fluid your blood is, the easier your condition is going to be. Following the water regime is a very important parameter. It is important that you consume plenty of warm liquids. Lemons and oranges had a very good effect on my condition. I believe that vitamin C has an extremely beneficial effect on the entire biochemistry of the body. At some point, I felt that I had difficulty with breathing. At some point, I felt that I had a sore throat, and at that moment I went to the doctor. I really wanted to just do a CT scan, computed tomography, but now there are big problems with getting to computed tomography immediately. Moreover, going to the doctor was extremely useful because the doctor held me for some time before CT, because the symptoms of pneumonia do not appear immediately, and if I would come, for example, to CT on the 3rd or 5th day, then CT would not show me any changes in the state of my lungs. It is important to understand that computed tomography is an X-ray examination. You are literally X-rayed. It must be understood that in the case of computed tomography, the radiation load is very high. I do not presume to say for sure, but in those days when I was engaged in nuclear physics, I had a specialty. I am a specialist in nuclear power plants, and I studied standards on radiation, and so in those days when I was studying, computed tomography was taking a third of the annual permitted dose of radiation for humans. CT is a high radiation load, therefore it is very important to do CT at the moment when the symptoms have already appeared, not earlier, but not later. It is very important to catch the moment when you feel a change in your lungs. What kind of changes in lungs? I felt pressure at the top of my lungs, and I felt harder to breathe. It was at the moment I went to CT, and it was at this moment that the therapist recommended me to do it. I had pneumonia. I had a slight lung damage. About 5% of the lungs were affected. So I believe that I achieved such a rather mild result due to the fact that I limited myself in physical exertion in every possible way, did breathing practices, breathing deeply, slowly and evenly, and thus rehabilitated my lungs and allowed blood to circulate freely through the alveoli and not to clog them, or clog minimally. First, I used the deep, even breathing technique. Once again, I repeat that an important part is the limiting slowdown of breathing while simultaneously maximizing the depth of inhalation and full exhalation. Besides the fact that this technique has a very positive effect on the lungs and allows them to be cleansed, this technique has a wonderful relaxing and calming effect. Every time when it seemed to me that I was about to die, I began to breathe deeply and slowly, and the condition of my lungs improved noticeably and visibly, and at that moment I began to feel better. Before you did CT, before you went to the doctor, now it is quite difficult at times, I recommend you a simple test for pneumonia. It is not absolute, but for many of you it will serve as a good help in self-diagnosis. Take a deep breath and hold your breath. If you are able to hold your breath for more than 15 seconds and you do not have a strong cough after this, then most likely everything is not so bad with your lungs. If you cannot stand 15 seconds, or if you have a vigorous cough after holding your breath for 15 seconds, then this is a case for concern. For self-massage, I work very tightly on the intercostal spaces and the spaces where the ribs attach to the sternum. The places where the pectoralis major muscle is attached are extremely strong reflex zones associated with the lungs. In addition, I recommend that you work on the point, the dimple under the collarbone. This point stimulates the work and functioning of the lung meridian. It is extremely important to realize that the body is intelligent and it brings information about problem areas to the surface of your skin. That is, I had the right lung more affected and accordingly the soreness on the right side along the sternum was higher. It is very important to understand that coughing can be both a way to clear your lungs and a way to injure your lungs. It is important that the cough is relieving you. If at the time of coughing you still want to cough more and you get tired, try to stop the cough. If during the coughing process you feel relief, then coughing is worth it. In order to cough correctly, it is highly recommended to understand which areas of the lungs are affected. In my case, it was the right lung. I put my hand on the spot where I felt I had the damaged area. I found this place through a sensation in the sternum. There was the greatest soreness. I put my hand on the spot where I felt the inflammation, breathed deeply, and just placing my hand on there was extremely helpful in relieving symptoms. In addition, at the moment when I was coughing, I tried to put my hand on the place where I was coughing. Unfortunately, people mostly do not know how to cough. People cough out of irritation, but they have to cough from the place where there are stagnant processes. Even now I still have an unpleasant dry cough, the painful one. And at the moment when I feel that a desperate cough begins to overcome me, I put my hands on those places where I feel heaviness and squeezing, and after a while I have a good cough, expectoration of sputum. It is very important to have a productive cough. An extremely important point is understanding how the psycho-emotional state changes. I have several acquaintances who have been through this disease. Among them there is, for example, a person who at one time suffered from severe alcohol addiction, and so he told me that he had attacks of delirium tremens, for example. And he told me that he had not been drinking for 3 years, and he told me that at some point, while suffering from COVID, he felt an absolutely depressive state, which ideally coincided with the state of a severe hangover. A state of despondency, a state of depression, and a complete rejection of the value of life. Something similar happened to me in the third week. I had already recovered physically. It seemed like I no longer had COVID. The analysis was not showing it. But nevertheless, I got an absolutely depressive state. I remember walking around my apartment, and any place I looked at, everything was disgusting. Things seemed ugly to me. The renovation, the colors in my apartment seemed terrible to me. I looked at my family and thought, oh my God, I am a terrible husband and a terrible father. How are such people in general? How can I be allowed to communicate with loved ones or with clients? My business is terrible. Everything seemed disastrous to me. In my profession, I constantly encounter people in difficult emotional states. Moreover, I know how to join people in difficult emotional states and walk there into their depression. And here, what helped me. The feeling that it was not me helped me. It's as if it's absolutely not me. If I didn't have this experience of psycho-emotional stability, readiness to digest that now I feel bad, I don't know how I would have endured this period, because it was really very difficult emotionally. Everyone was annoying me. I was devaluing all my contacts, all my work, all my life. It seemed to me pointless and completely wasted. Here, a phrase that once I heard from Boris Abramovich Berezovsky turned out to be extremely useful for me. There was money, there will be money, now there is no money. So I understood that there was happiness in my life. There will be happiness in my life. Now there is no happiness. This is a period that is going to end. Every time it hits you, know that it will end, that this is now just an effect of the disease. Well, the last curious thing that I wanted to tell you is how I lost my sense of smell. For a while I had the sense of smell. I liked smells. I was eating oranges, lemons, some fruits. The meal was delicious. At one moment I went to bed. In the middle of the night, you know this state when you have not woken up yet, but you already feel that something is wrong. I felt that something was wrong with me. It literally poured out of my eyes. When I got up to look at the pillow, it was wet with tears. Liquid also poured from the nose. Apparently it was also the lacrimal glands, and all the mucous membranes were working very intensively, including, pardon the details, intestinal mucous membranes. And in my lungs there was a feeling as if I had literally inhaled pepper. Burning sensation of irritation over the entire surface of my lungs. I started to cough, unstoppable, unresponsive cough which only makes the condition worse. There was pressure in my head. I got pain from concussion, and at some point I realized that I had to stop. I had to wake up. I said to myself, wake up. I got up, made myself some tea, cut the lemons, and noticed that the lemon had no smell at all. Lemons have a very strong scent. Tea became bitter and sour. No feeling of the wonderful aroma of the tea. I like expensive and high-quality teas. No sense of aroma. No sense of difference between lemon and orange. All citrus fruits had the same taste. They were just sweet and just sour, with no aroma. It was a difficult moment because at that moment I was already disgusted with everything. I was tired of watching the news. I read all the books. My brain was not working very well to perceive new information. I was tired of laying. I was tired of everything. And then, at that moment, I suddenly was deprived of my last joy to eat something tasty. Some time ago I gave up eating something sweet, and suddenly everything became absolutely tasteless, like foam rubber. And so, until now, I have not fully restored my sense of smell. It is coming back very slowly. As always, we make the most of what happens to us. This allowed me to revolutionize my diet. I began to eat less because the food tasted less delicious. Why should I eat unpalatable food and overeat? This reduced my waistline quite well. At the end of this video, let's think about how we can help our loved ones if they have COVID. Relatively speaking, what kind of support I needed most at the moment when I was sick. Firstly, it is very important to keep the balance between risk assessments and whipping up the atmosphere. It is important to understand that if you have a normal oxygen level in your blood, then you should not worry and escalate the situation. The feeling that this is a terrible disease from which people die actually reduces the level of the immune response, and accordingly the disease progresses much more severely. On the other hand, understand that it is very important to limit your loved ones in carbohydrate intake. Understand that your drinking regime is essential. Understand that this is a serious illness, and it is the more serious the more physical activity you have during this illness. Another point is that many people tolerate the disease relatively easily, and then they are covered with secondary consequences. I have an acquaintance who was relatively easily ill for 2 weeks, then rushed to his job, which is very important to him, and received very serious neurological consequences, including paralysis and even loss of consciousness. There are some studies that say that the virus enters the brain through the olfactory nerve, and accordingly, the neurological consequences can be very serious, and it is important to treat this disease in such a way that you feel better, but you still do not rush headlong into your everyday life, into your daily load. It is worth completing the treatment to the end. It is worth treating yourself with care. It is worth holding your loved ones without whipping up passion and tell them that, dear, you're much more important to me than the consequences of your work, the consequences of bringing some money. They will not replace your life and health for me. Thank you for watching this video to the end. If you liked this video and it seemed interesting and useful, press the like button and share with your loved ones if you think it will be useful for them. Stanislav Chernog was with you, the author and founder of the School of Vector Massage and Somatics and the channel of the same name. The channel where we teach you to observe your body, teach you to be aware of what kind of person you are, to choose right life strategies, and as a result of these right strategies, become healthier and richer. Until next time, friends, goodbye. And we had already completed our video, we had already packed up and packed our equipment, turned off the lights, and I remembered one important thing. This was not my first contact with a person who had COVID. And in those times I did not get sick, but this time I got sick. And this time I got sick exactly because I was wildly tired, I was overworked, I was emotionally exhausted, I took on too much load, and exactly because of this I got sick. I remember this distinct feeling, well, I wish I could be ill at least, and I understand that I gave my body permission to get sick. And now I understand that the efforts that I spent to get somewhere, to complete something, to implement some of my projects were never worth these 3 weeks at all. So, take care of yourself, do not overwork, be calm, and you won't get sick.